our first chapter of geography, resources, and development. In this chapter, we'll discuss about the various resources and how those resources are used for the development. Okay, so let's start our chapter. As it reads, everything available in our environment which can be used to satisfy our needs, provided it is technologically accessible, economically feasible, and culturally acceptable, can be termed as a resources. So it is a basic definition of resources. So basically, what are the resources? Those things which are available naturally, okay, and to sustain our life, which makes our life easy. But there are many resources which we cannot use directly as they are available in the nature, like minerals. We cannot use minerals directly, but through using the various technologies, we can make them accessible for us, like groundwaters and like gold, silver, so coals and crude oil. So there are so many things. The process of transformation of things available in our environment involves an interdependent relationship between nature, technology, and institutions. So these things when work together to make those resources usable for human beings. Human beings interact with nature through technology and create institutions to accelerate their economic development. Do you think that resources are free gifts of nature as is assumed by many? They are not. Resources are a function of human activities. Human beings themselves are essential components of resources. They transform material available in our environment into resources and use them. So, human beings also in itself are resources. We are also a resource. We are also resource, uh, which is the most important resource available in the nature, because of the human. Because in the lack of human beings, there we are not be able to use those natural resources. So, human beings are the most important resources. As we can see in the example, like we are using steels, okay, but without using human resources, we are not able to use the steel, which is in the form of mineral available in the nature. We are not able to use them. Okay, so they transform material available in our environment into resources and use them. So, what the humans do, they transform those materials which are available in nature to for usable. These resources can be classified in the following ways: on the basis of on the basis of origin, like biotic, abiotic. And biotic means where which are having life, and abiotic, where is no life, like soil, like minerals. And biotic are like flora and fauna. On the basis of exhaustibility, exhaustibility means the resources are in various resources which are renewable and non-renewable. And on the basis of ownership, like individual, community, and national and international, we'll discuss in detail. Okay, on the basis of status of development, potential developed stocks and reserves. So these are the classification of the resources. And now, types of resources. Okay, we'll discuss in detail about this. So on the basis of origin, first was the on the basis of origin, biotic resources. What are the biotic resources? These are obtained from biosphere and have life, such as human beings, flora and fauna, fisheries, livestock. So biotic resources, bio means life. We studied biology, okay. So bio means life. So those resources which are having life are known as biotic resources. And abiotic, which do not have like which are composed of non-living things, okay. are called abiotic resources. For example, rocks and minerals or metals. Okay, on the basis of exhaustibility, renewable resources, the resources which can be renewed or reproduced, by physical, chemical, or mechanical processes are known as renewable or replenishable resources. Means those resources which can be uh, reproduced are known as renewable resources, like solar energy, wind energy, water. Okay, and there are resources which cannot be reproduced, like crude oil, coal. uh, these are non-renewable resources. Because and also on the basis of ownership, individual resources, on the basis of ownership means who is owning the resources, like individual resources, those resources which are owned by a particular company or any individual person. And community resources, there are resources which are owned by a specific community. So it is known as uh, there are resources which are accessible to all the members of the community, like burial grounds, village public parks, public schools, also we can say playgrounds, roads. National resources, technically all the resources belong to the nation. The country has legal powers to acquire even private property for public good. You might have seen roads, canals, railways being constructed on fields owned by some individual. Urban development authorities get empowered by the government to acquire land. All the minerals, water resources, forests, wildlife, land within the political boundaries and oceanic areas up to 12 nautical miles. So these are resources comes under the national known as a national resources, which are owned by the government of a country. And international resources, there are resources which are international, which is uh, there are international institutions which regulate some resources. The oceanic resources beyond 200 nautical miles of the exclusive economic zone belong to open ocean, and no individual country can utilize these without the occurrence of international institution. So beyond the boundary of any country, so there are resources, as we see in the oceans. The oceanic resources beyond 200 nautical miles. So these are resources which cannot be occupied by any country. So these resources have to manage by the international institutions. So these are known as international resources. On the basis of and now next, on the basis of the status of development, potential resources and developed resources. What are the potential resources? Resources which are in their natural forms but not being used till yet, but they had the potential to use as a resources. uh, so like there are a lot of deposits in various places, like deposits of coal, deposits of groundwater which are not being used yet till yet are known as a potential resources. And developed resources, those resources which are being used already. Okay, so these are developed resources and are potential resources. And stock materials in the environment which have the potential to satisfy human needs, but human beings do not have the appropriate technology to assess these, are including among stock. Okay, for water as a compound of two inflammable gases. Like in water there are two gases, hydrogen, oxygen, but we do not have the technology to use those gases, to separate those gases and use them. Okay, and reserves are the subset of the stock which can be put into use with the help of existing technical uh, know how, but their use has not been started. So those are reserves. Development of resources. Resources are vital for human survival. Okay. Resources are vital for human survival as well as for maintaining the quality of life. It was believed that resources are free gifts of nature. As a result, human beings use them indiscriminately, and this has led to the following major problems. Means, as we have resources in the natural form, so what the people did, they used these resources indiscriminately uh, for their profit, for their because of their greed. Like any individual company which is using natural resources indiscriminately, like groundwater or minerals or forests. What they are doing, they are exploiting those resources, and this impacts a this cause a negative impact on the nature, like depletion of resources for satisfying the greed of few individual, accumulation of resources in few hands, which in turn divide the society into two segments, poor and rich. Indiscriminate exploitation of resources has led to global ecological crises such as global warming, ozone layer depletion, environmental pollution, and land degradation. So these are the cause of the using these resources indiscriminately. An equitable distribution of resources has become essential for a sustained quality of life and global peace. So it is important. It is very important at this time to use to distribute these resources equally, and for the sustenance of these resources, like they will be used for by the future generations also. We should also think about our future generation and our other creatures also, which are who are dependent on these resources. We human beings not only the uh, only one to dependent on these resources. There are other creatures, animals, plants, who are also dependent on these resources. Therefore, resources planning is essential for sustainable existence of all forms of life. Sustainable existence is a component of sustainable development. So, it is very important to have plan for using these resources, that they may be available for the future generation, and also may be uh, used by the other creatures apart from human beings also, which are also having equal right on these resources. uh, okay. So it is important point here. What is sustainable development? Sustainable economic development means development should take place without damaging the environment, and development in the present should not compromise with the needs of the future generations. Okay. So sustainable development means development should be carry on without damaging the ecological balance, and should be available for the future generation. So it is known as a sustainable economic development. And now next is resource planning. What is resource planning? Planning is the widely acceptable strategy for judicious use of resources. It has importance in a country like India, which has enormous diversity in the availability resources. So, resource planning is necessary. It is important for a country like India where resources are scattered in various places. Okay, there are regions which are rich in certain types of resources but are deficient in some other resources. Like if we go in places like MP, so there you will find MP, or you will go Rajasthan. There are one type of resource that you will get In Rajasthan, there are deficient in water, so there are imbalanced in the availability of resources. So resource planning is important. So there are some reasons which can be considered self-sufficient in terms of the availability of resources, and there are some reasons which have acute shortage of some vital resources. For example, the states of Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, and Madhya Pradesh are rich in minerals and coal deposits. Arunachal Pradesh has abundance of water resources, but lacks in infrastructural development. The state of Rajasthan is very well endowed with solar and wind energy, but lacks in water resources. So, in that is why we need resource planning to use those resources equitably. Uh, for the good of the everyone in the country. The cold desert of Ladakh is relatively isolated from the rest of the country. It has very rich cultural heritage, but it is deficient in water, infrastructure, and some vital minerals. This calls for balanced resource planning in the national, state, regional, and local level. So, it is the need of resource planning for the development of a country and the people.